Were there certain experiences that you felt prepared you for what you're doing now, so that somebody who maybe wants to intentionally start to build in some of those things could start to see like, oh, these types of experiences are going to help me expand my scope as a leader?
If I look back at my career thus far, I would say one of the things that has really helped me move forward, and by the way, it's not like a continuous sort of forward momentum. It's kind of starts and stops, fits and stops, and these sorts of things, right? I've always been sort of leaning into new opportunities and to uncertainty. And, I find that sometimes I do perfectly okay there. Other times I really mess things up and don't do so well. So let me give an example, right? So I think probably one of the biggest ones was what I talked about, this team of 150 people. The background on that was that the team was focused on cloud native applications. And so this is back in 2015-ish, 2016, when things were still very early. Docker had just come out a few years ago. And what happened at the time, I was the CTO for our end user computing group within VMware. And I started seeing this noise out there about containers, and there's all this stuff around, virtualization is going to be dead and blah, blah, blah. Obviously, very funny to look at now, and virtualization is still great. It's used for everything, even with containers. But at the time, it was very, nerve-wracking and worrisome. I really felt it to be an existential threat for the company. So I kind of rushed headlong into this, started organizing folks internally. There was a number of projects and other things already happening internally, and I helped put some structure around that, pull people together, start having these more unified conversations. I started giving readouts and updates to our executive team, and definitely got their attention. I think they were very worried about this sort of thing. So what happened was that they eventually gave me the charter and funding to go start a new business unit focused on these cloud native applications. So again, this is where I had managed, my CTO for end user computing, 4 or 5 people, and now they pulled together a whole bunch of these other teams. All sorts of stuff happened pretty quickly, which shot the team size up to 150. So I was very much in over my head, and hadn't run a team of that size before, hadn't really even been responsible for driving sort of new product integration, at least not in the way that this thing was happening. And so, I had these plans to churn out all these different products and things and so forth. So I was very much thrown in the middle of it. And when I look back at it, those were some stressful days. I think I probably got thrown a little too far in the deep end. I think we were trying to go too fast. I think we all felt this sort of weight of the company on our shoulders, this notion that, we are the ones that have to help prevent this sort of calamity from happening, right? That was sort of, and that was partly, whether I said it explicitly or not, I kind of set the tone for the team, right? So I could see it, and I could feel a lot of the stress there and all these sorts of things, and wasn't as crisp on some of the decision making, wasn't as crisp at sort of leading at scale, this sort of stuff. And it was actually through all those mistakes. But well, a couple of things. So first, I was given trust from our leadership team to be, hey, like, let's throw Kit in there and see what he can do. And I think those sorts of situations, while they're tough, and when I look back at it, I'm like, wow, I would do so many things so differently now. It was also probably the time of greatest growth and learning for me, right? And as I said, I've been able to then apply those learnings in this newer role here. So I think it's, my biggest thing is like lean in, and like when something feels uncomfortable, like that's okay.
The story you shared about the experience of starting up the new business unit, I think is so interesting, because it's like you identified an existential opportunity for the company and really created momentum and interest around it, and then sort of you have this kind of formally codified as a business unit to build out and support. Um, for somebody who's never done something like that, can you tell us a little bit more about like what did that process look like when you were having the conversation with leadership and they're like, we need to create a formal business unit around this. Here's the charter, go. What did that look like?
Yeah. So I think it was, if I think back, it was a series of discussions in either late 2014 or late 2015 with our executive staff, e-staff. And it started out first as kind of, hey, like they had a question like, what's going on with all this container stuff? Like, give us sort of a lay of the land. And, we sort of outlined what the things that we were seeing, the trends we were seeing, this move toward developers driving a lot of early architecture decisions that sort of could define, long term, basically what vendors could be in or out of that architectural or that technology solution, and so some of the other fundamental changes happening. So that was kind of the first step in kind of getting their interest in it, and then obviously they were like, okay, how does this relate to us, and what can we do about it? So there we, started formulating some different plans. Okay, how will we need to change as a company? It's like we already started getting a bit into open source, but it's like clearly we need to do a lot more there, which we have actually. I'm really happy to see all the open source commitments that we made. But there's other things. How do we better engage with developers? How do we drive more SaaS, cloud service offerings? So some of these different things. So it kind of became, there's a lot of strategy work really that was happening there, and we went through the series of, probably like once a month. Actually, it was pretty relatively frequent because it takes many many weeks to prepare for these things. But that was sort of the evolution, and then all out of it, they're like, okay, because we kind of came to, here's a series of new offerings we need. Here's a series of other investments that we need to make in these different areas. So they said, okay, go and do it. And then we built up the team. We smashed all those different, teams together into this new organization and went off and started executing on it. So I think it was one of those things where, what do we do right? What we did right was got the attention of the executive, saying, here's what could be an existential threat to the company, and something with that, in my mind, I thought it would have a much bigger impact much sooner. What we've seen now is things take a lot longer actually than you might expect in enterprise software. But but that was the first thing, to get their attention. So we got their attention. I think on the strategy side, when I look back, in some ways, I feel like we had some good ideas there, but we also didn't go far enough, because what a lot of this represents, and it's both cloud native specifically, but probably the whole shift to SaaS and cloud services more generally, is that it represents a business model shift. And this is so foundational. And I don't think I really understood the full scope of it at the time, about how foundationally we needed to change. And so when I look back, I think we were sort of rushing headlong to try and get all this done, because again, we had assumed that our time horizon was much shorter than we actually had, right? It's 2022 now, 6-7 years after where the story took place. And the industry has evolved, but at the same time, it hasn't changed or been quite as disruptive as I had worried. And so I think if I were to do it again, it'd be less around, hey, let's go do these 10 things, and more like, let's pick one or two that are really truly foundational. Give ourselves time to figure those things out, and then start expanding once we get those kind of foundational things in place, right? So I think we did some things well, but also some things I would do much differently if I could do them again.